Well, it's that time of year again, or time of week again. It's Sunday, 6 p.m. Welcome to Steve's Place. Today we're going to be having Randy Powell talk to us about Vortex Based Mathematics. In the meantime, I'd like to remind everyone about our upcoming conference, the August 10th and 14th in Albuquerque. The hotel rooms, you can sign up for your hotel rooms at this point, be $82 a night for one, $86 for two, and up. But it includes a free buffet there. We're talking about a full buffet, not one of these continental affairs. And I think you'll find it very enjoyable. We'll be served in the same place we do our evening stuff. If you want to sign up, it's a 30% discount from now till Wednesday. So please give me a call, 520-463-1994, or you can sign up online, and I'm up 24/7, it seems like, so don't be shy about calling. I'd like to also remind everyone that we do have our Tesla Tech YouTube channel memberships at $9.99 per month for global access. You get everything we have up there. We have over 600 DVDs, and I'm sending off another 400 that'll be up there by the end of the month. So, or next month rather. Starting next week, they should start going up there. It'll be all the global sciences from 1990 to about 1995, on this batch. So it'd be a great time to sign up and check our stuff out. Go to teslatech.info and check out our directory if you're looking for a specific speaker. And I'd like to remind you, we have this thing called Super Thanks now. If you watch a video, underneath the video will appear this thing where you can have thumbs up, thumbs down, share it. But the big thing is thanks. With Super Thanks, it gives you an opportunity to donate anywhere from like $1 to $50 there. And let's say, thank you, really like this particular video and do more of them. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our guest, Randy. And why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, Randy?
All right. Well, my name's Randy Powell. It's good to be back with Tesla Tech and with you, Steve. I first spoke at Tesla Tech back in 2010, so sometime around 12 years ago. And I've attended the conference several times and always had a great time. I've been working with Marco since a little bit before that time. So we go back many years now. And primarily within this project, I guess my claim to fame is that I was the first person without any use of computer modeling or anything to be able to map the toroidal number map and complete its full surface topology, and got some different insights in terms of how I saw vortex-based mathematics functioning. And so that since then, many different people have come in and out of the project and contributed different things, some of which we'll see in this book. I know you've already had a previous episode with Marco and with Karen Elkins, who's on the screen there, who is the person behind Science to Sage magazine, and they've recently released this book, which does contain some of my work, and was intended to have some more commentary by myself in there, though I contributed to a lot of the things in here. But, life has just kept me so busy, we weren't all able to coordinate as much as we would have liked. But I think this will be a good opportunity for me to go through a PDF of some of the stuff in the book. There's obviously a lot in there, and give my take on it, which may have some different little nuances, and also maybe just a lot of corroboration with Marco's work. I never have considered myself like some separate discoverer or any, I consider this all one family project in a way. And I do at this point. Marco is like a family member to me. And so I always give homage to him and his discoveries. As some people may or may not know, he's been working on this project since he was around, I don't know, I think 15 or 16, and he's now in his 60s, so it'll be about almost 50 years of work from his end has gone into this, and I only really intersected with that in the last 15 or so, roughly. And so, a lot happened before I came along. But that also, our connecting, happened to coincide with YouTube coming up and Marco getting his first videos up in the early days of YouTube. And that's where his work was able to get out to a wider audience. It was a pretty narrow audience at first. And when I first released my videos, I had no idea that they would be viewed hundreds of thousands or millions of times. I probably would have thought more about them at the time. When I put those initial videos out, and that's still because the internet has this sort of timeless quality. That's still where a lot of people know me from. It's just those early videos I did. Steve was just asking me how old I was now. I'm 43 years old now, and I was still in my 20s when I did those videos. So a lot's gone on, a lot's happened, and I think there's still a lot to happen. With this, there certainly is. The final chapter has not been written on this, and that's where everybody who's listening now comes in. So let's talk about what it is. I'll glean over just a little bit of this in the beginning of the book. I skipped over the intro. So Vortex Based Mathematics. This intro says Vortex Based Mathematics is a type of mathematics. As Russell P. Blake, former director for Microsoft Advanced Future Operating Systems, said, "This has never existed before in academia and has been overlooked by all conventional science." Blake has been very clear in stating he believes it will transform all technology and science. It is well known that a civilization cannot evolve further than the level of their mathematics. The name is vortex-based mathematics because it is based upon whether the underpinning nested vortices are staggered or aligned, which determines the function of the molecule and creates the ultimate quantum computer that obsoletes all existing quantum computers. So leave it to Marco to just jump right in. I'm sure a lot of that is very esoteric and obscure to a lot of people. And just in many levels, that's been a lot of my role in this, is just helping to distill it. I am a rare bird as well who I identify and feed off of Marco's sort of everything all at once style. And that's sort of how my mind works. But I think I've been a teacher for many years. I teach martial arts, and I also teach kids and teach school. And that's helped me to at least be able to learn how to distill things in a slightly more linear way. So what does all that mean? Vortex-based mathematics, Marco's always made very big claims about it. That's part of the attractive thing right in the beginning. Ideas like being able to produce unlimited energy, inexhaustible energy, to tap into what is commonly called the 0 point. That's the term that I generally like to use as opposed to free energy or other things, but you could call it what you want. And all the implications that has, like being able to produce unlimited food. Maybe not an obvious implication, but partially what he's referencing here in the end of that sentence that I read is the ability to affect or cure all diseases by being able to tap into what's really going on with the DNA, the double spiral helix, and its more complex interactions. Because vortex-based mathematics has made specific predictions. And that's one of the reasons why we refer to it as under that umbrella of the grand unified field theory or the gut equation, because it has been able to make predictions that are both relevant to, say, physics, electrical engineering, as well as chemistry and biology, and even computing and other things. So anything that you can apply mathematics to, you can, the idea is that you can apply vortex-based mathematics to it. It's a system that's based, instead of based on analysis and the sort of attempt to reassemble a multiplicity of terms, it's a method based on synthesis, which is a simple equation that sort of works as a philosopher's stone. You can throw anything at it, and it's gonna give you new information, and it's ultimately gonna reveal to you the secrets of how it works. And that's not just science. I'm here. This is Tesla Tech. I'm talking about technology. I've been talking about technology for years. I personally, it's not really my interest. I mean, I am interested in helping people, but for the most part, I only got involved with technology because, as Marco said early on, technology is a gauntlet, like the old medieval gauntlets. And with a gauntlet, you can only make a forward escape. You can't go back. So it's, technology is either going to destroy us or we're going to solve the riddle of it. We're going to somehow unify it in a way that liberates us instead of destroys us. Because I think right now we're on the fast track to total enslavement by technology, and that's the opposite of where we're trying to go with VBM. So that's really why I've thrown in with this. But the reality to me is that this gives you an understanding that's far more profound than technology, an understanding of life, of consciousness as the basis of scientific observation, which is also coming out now more with people like Bernardo Castro and others who are making these arguments, and I think doing well with it to overturn the materialist model. But vortex-based mathematics gives it the true matrix. It gives it the numbers. It gives it a real detail and specificity that I think many other and all other models to some degree are lacking. And so the real value of that for me has always been just the confirmation, and also I didn't really need the confirmation, but the ability to explain what I already knew by experience. Because for me, the reality is we are already the technology. We are already immortal. We are already capable of all of these things. But through technology, it gives us a way to externalize that. And that may be for good or ill. Only time will tell. So let's look into a little bit more about what we're talking about with all this. So vortex-based mathematics. Okay, ultimately, Marco developed a very simple equation. Let me see if I can just skip ahead so a little bit better image on that. Here we go. Okay, so you can see that basic equation, which should be a circle with 9 numbers going around the circle. Okay, you have the 9 at the apex. And it's the only number that aligns over the 0, which is not at the geometric center of the circle, by the way. It's offset. And that's very significant. It's much like your DNA is not symmetrical, but offset. And what is it that's offsetting it? It's that red pyramid there, composed of the 3, 9, and 6. It's the Holy Trinity, if you will. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's the Trinity of Spirit and God, God's divine energy, which is creating this other representation or manifestation, this doubling circuit that you see, the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 pattern that many people are familiar with. And if you're not familiar, I know I'm going to gloss over some of this stuff because this is a short format, and my goal here is not really to get deep into explaining mathematics because it's not really the best format for it. And there are many other talks talking about that. But I want to give everybody just a general sense of what's going on. So Marco discovered this equation that had these two separate components, this 396 pyramid triangulation focused on the number 9 at the apex, and this closed loop circuit, which over time we would come to see represents what we call the physical world of mass, the world of manifestation. Okay, but I'm going to go back just a second and just come back to where we were. Ultimately, that equation predicts these forms that you see throughout, this shape called a torus or a donut. Now, the ones at the top of this page are from more complex base systems, and that is where a lot of the work that I've done comes into. These are artistic representations done by Chuck Middaugh. He's a great artist and animator that we've worked with and hopefully will continue to work with. Marco did also want me to mention that we are looking for more people to help with animations and art for upcoming videos that we want to get out there and to help explain this. The great thing about Vortex Based Mathematics is it's 100% visual. Everything that I can say about it can be represented visually. And for most people, that's tremendous. I mean, this is the reason why this is unifying the different maths, is because it makes everything geometric, whether it's the functions of calculus or trigonometry or any other type of mathematical insight algebra. They're all occurring in a 3D space, 3D geometric space, which is the bounded infinity, right? It is the closed system of the physical universe. Okay, so ultimately the equation that Marco came up with through a lot of many years of work predicted this shape of the torus. That was where I kind of came along and intersected with it, but I was having certain problems when I was trying to work with it. And so I was ultimately able to come up with a method to move along any given axis and know what was happening on every other axis, because that's the beauty of the numbers functioning as an absolute unity, is that in the true fashion of a hologram, of being a mathematical hologram, by knowing what's happening in any location, you can know what's happening in every location. And that's why it can obsolete the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and a lot of these sort of seeming contradictions that are found within the observations of quantum mechanics, but they're not actually truly contradictions. It's just what happens at the barrier where light, even a single photon, will affect the system. So it's the observation, not actually your consciousness, I believe, that's affecting the system, but the light, the observation. So ultimately, what is this torus about? Well, we see the torus shape all throughout nature. I believe that every atom is a type of a torus. We see it in our human body as a torus, which sucks things in at the top, shoots them out at the bottom, has an upright vertical axis, has bilateral symmetry. Our blood cells are in the shape of the torus. We see it in the Earth's magnetic field and in the galaxies, and perhaps even in the flying saucers. All of these are representations of the torus. Now, even in the DNA, it took me many years to be able to find the science to back this up, and I actually have a colleague now who's working on this, and we're hopefully going to be getting together to collaborate on all the implications of this, because I was able to figure out and predict using VBM that it would actually be many different it would take many different double helical strands to bond together to form a torus in the DNA, and that's actually now been shown to be true. So we see these toroids in the DNA. You see them in the enzymes that unzip them, unwind them, digest them, all these different things, all using the function. This is just nature's ecological system. It represents the perfect form of creation for God. And it also represents perfect harmonics, perfect sound, to the point even of absolute silence, right? Perfect harmony, to blend in with everything, to become one with everything, to resonate with everything, to know everything. That's what this is. It's a harmonic machine. And everything that's functioning, all of energy, is actually really sound-based. So that's where we come back to the old scriptures and everything. In the beginning was the Word. So the vibratory essence of all that exists, as Margot says, is no longer on its elusive hide-and-seek trip. It's been found. With the introduction of Vortex Based Mathematics, you'll be able to see how energy is expressing itself mathematically. Each one of these numbers represents a harmonic nodal point, just like a note on a keyboard. Okay, they represent nodal points where waves are curving, and the torus itself models perfect wave dynamics. So many of you, who I'm sure are very astute in all these subjects, already see the relevance. This math has no anomalies and shows the dimensional shape and function of the universe as being a toroid or a donut-shaped black hole. This is the template for the universe, and it's within our base 10 decimal system. Okay, so as Marco says, we don't really have 10 fingers, we have 5 fingers, and they're mirror images where the thumbs are opposals, right? Everything is based on spin symmetry and on the axis, and that's ultimately what vortex-based mathematics is showing. Okay, it's showing the pathway of spirit. So what is spirit? He says here, the wholes in the parts, as above, so below, so within is the soul, sanctified mirrors in a holographic universe. So we get this sense of the holographic universe, but what is this hidden thing in it? Where is the dark energy? Where is that source of time, motion, and vibration? And what is it? In a way, it's undefined, right? In a way, it's dimensionless, except where it's intersecting. That's just how subtle and perfect it is. It's very difficult to talk about. We refer to it in a sort of negative theological way, almost by saying what it isn't. I mean, one of the things that we do say about it, about this energy underlying the warping and curving of the relativity of the toroidal space-time continuum, this eternal energy, this timeless but also eternal thing which has no duration and infinite duration at the same time, which creates the closed infinity of duration of physical mass, the non-decaying spin of the electron and all that. One of the things that we can say about it, which is distinct from the world of nature as we observe it, or representation, is that it's linear. It doesn't bend, it doesn't warp and curve. Sometimes it has been referred to as a particle, as a pulse, as a surge, as an emanation, as a point source, wave dynamics, the breath of God. Sometimes I've even come to think of it as a pure solid, which is mind-boggling and sort of points to the fact that there is no true pure solid in the physical world, which is actually always fluid and changing and feminine in that sense and dynamic. Spirit, as I see it, is masculine. It is the yang, if you will, and material world is feminine and changing in that sense and time-based. And so ultimately all this philosophical stuff is cool, and I can talk about it for hours. We can look at how this has been witnessed, and it's part of so many ancient philosophies and religions. It's in the Vikings. I have a great interest in the Vikings. They were a large part of my ancestry, and they had a great reverence for the number 9. They talk a lot throughout their literature about many of the aspects of this. Marco derived it from Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i faith, who claimed a prophecy out of Iran in the 1800s and wrote many epistles. And his name, Baha'u'llah, I've often pointed out, has that same resonance of the word Valhalla, which was very important to the Vikings, and all intersects at the same time with this mathematics of the number 9. I mean, it's in the Bible, of course. It's in many ancient philosophies, the Greeks and others. Okay, and you can see it in the art and architecture, this form of the torus, the central significance of the vortex, its connection with sound, and many other things. So ultimately, out of this mathematics, through the insights of various engineers and scientists, it was come up with this idea of the Rodin Coil, which it says here is a miniature atomic particle accelerator. 124875 is a lossless inertia. 3 and 6 magnetic dipoles, and 9 is an invisible monopole centered in between. Now, that is one good way to think about the number 9 and its linearity. It is thinking of the law of inertia, because all these laws of physics are all come directly with this math, like, for instance, the inverse square law of gravitation, but also the law of inertia, which most people think of inertia as like stillness, right? Or as like gravity or weight, but really inertia is the law that without another force acting, if you have a force that acts on something and no other force acts upon that thing, it will move in a straight line into infinity forever, right? Now, we don't really observe that because there are always other forces acting on things. But that is the law of inertia, and that is exactly what causes that, is this linearity of the number 9. It is the monopole that was postulated by Maxwell. Okay, so you can see on this page it's talking a little bit about how Marco decrypted the most great name of God out of the Baha'i scriptures, Abha. He took the mathematics of that, and that's how I initially came up with this equation, right? And there's I've done a lot of research. I would love to do presentations at some point on just the whole history of all this, and even in Baha'u'llah's own writings, things that I found that he referenced from ancient writings, a lot of them preserved under the writings of Balinus, who was the Arabic form of the Apollonius of Tyana, which has a lot of connections to that ancient Greek world. So there's a lot of interesting things about how this has been known throughout history. You can see it in different cultures. But Marco was able to decrypt that mathematics out of it. And ultimately what all of these people are talking about with this stuff is the name of God, being able to create the perfect harmonics, the perfect sound. And Baha'u'llah is even explicit that it can create, it can be the secret of all the sciences and create an engine that requires no fuel and produces no fumes. And he gets pretty specific about what he thought its capabilities were. And you can find that in many other places as well, in many esoteric traditions. Ultimately, okay, so you can see here, again, more forms of the torus, a black hole, our human eye. It's always got, the black hole is not an infinite density, or if it is what we would call infinite density, it's something totally different than what we consider measurable physical mass, obviously by its infinity, because there's always a hole or an aperture. It's not a solid, right, at the center. There always has to be this hole for the energy to pass through, for things to transform, for there to be movement and a flux. What we're ultimately defining here are the pathways of least resistance for everything to travel. As a martial artist and as a jiu-jitsu coach, there's always a pathway of least resistance, a way that things are not forced. And the pathway of least resistance is the key to temperature regulation, which is the key to overcoming entropy, which is heat loss. Okay, so entropy means there's friction, means there's heat loss, means there's effort in the system. And we're trying to create effortless motion, the purest kind of dance, perfect movement, harmonics, and physics. And in order to do that, you have to create an aperture for the heat to concentrate and then to be able to dissipate and cool itself off over its surface topology using magnetism. And this mathematics reveals the secret pathways of magnetism and how it's moving everything. The magnetism is the closest you can come in the physical world of the senses to experiencing this energy, because this energy exists at the center of magnetism. And that is really the secret, as Marco has quoted many times. It was from an old Dick Tracy thing, that he controls magnetism, controls the universe. And so by controlling magnetism, we can tap into not only the secret of our own bodies, because those magnetic fields exist in the major groove of our own DNA, but we can also tap into ionic acoustic levitation, hypersonic travel, and many other things. Right? So it says here, the purpose of life is to receive divine guidance and inspiration and ultimately realize our oneness with the Creator. The human brain is an antenna that communes with God. By the number 9 being in vertical alignment above the hole in the Abha cipher, there is a door that opens up. The 5th dimension and all of the higher multi-dimensions are contained and compressed together in the omni dimension, which is represented by distance and spatial area. The vertical alignment reveals the apex of consciousness. This is the highest station of life in God. So the thing that makes us unique as humans is our upright nature, right? It makes us unique from the animals, our standing upright. And we even use that in the sense of virtue and morality, being upright. To sin means to miss the mark, right? It's an archery term. So it is about this linearity, about perfect aim, about alignment. People often use that. And ultimately, we can't force these insights. We can't force this technology to exist. We can't, and the problem that over the many years of working with this is that everyone wants to jump right into the forcing. Everyone wants to innovate before they can even take the time to understand anything. And I truly believe that you have to be receptive to this stuff. It already exists. We're the ones that, by our own sin, if you will, are missing the mark and are not receiving the inspiration, because divine intelligence is there for us to receive, to tap into. But it's also, as you can see around the world, a very rare commodity. So a big part of this and a big part of this teaching is learning how to intonate, how to use what Marco calls here biophysical harmonics. By our own intonation, by our own worship of the Creator, by our own communing with the Holy Spirit, we can tap directly into this inspiration. We can get direct insight, direct knowledge. And it's not just a matter of private revelation. I mean, what we're trying to do is take it beyond that and to apply it. And, you know, all of us are mistaken at times. And none of us have achieved that true perfection. But we are constantly refining to that point. And so Vortex Based Mathematics is not just like a thing that you sit down and think about and write on paper. That's part of it. It's not just a thing to be done on a chalkboard, but it's really an internal work of deep insight. The deepest work that I put into all this is through my practice of biophysical harmonics, which I may have taken farther than anybody in this, in terms of whether or not I'm doing it all correctly is for God to know. But I judge it all by the results. And so you can read in here some about Marco's ideas about how that is. Maybe in another occasion I'll get into this. These were some, I talked to Marco a long time ago about how this connected with the concept of the Tori in Japan and Shinto. These Tori gates in Japan, you're never supposed to walk directly through the center. And that's because at the center of the torus, everything is always deflected. Only, as they say in Shinto, only spirit can pass directly through the center, which is why pi, you can't get a precise number because the radius never directly intersects the geometric center. Everything is splayed and slightly askew. And that's what gives everything its angle and motion and its maximal ability to accelerate. Everything at its fastest acceleration will ultimately make a vortex. Okay? Okay, so there's some more images, ideas of the vortex. Imploding at the top, exploding at the bottom. Big Bang is at the bottom. That's an explosion, an expansion, a cooling off. It gets most cool at the outer equator. And then it starts to be reheated, reaccelerated, and renewed, right? Rejuvenated and reborn. Okay, so this is the way this number works. Here's a good example of observing this in nature in sonophysics, sometimes called cavitation, where they're imploding. It says imploding cavity in a liquid irradiated with ultrasound is captured in a high-speed flash photomicrograph. The implosion heats the gases inside the cavity to 5,500 degrees Celsius. Since this cavity formed near a solid surface, the implosion is asymmetric, expelling a jet of liquid at roughly 400 kilometers per hour. Both heat and the jet contribute to a unique chemical environment in the liquid. The diameter of the cavity is about 150 microns. Ultimately, it's able to create those extreme temperatures, something near the surface of the sun, and not destroy everything on the outside. In other words, the temperature is regulated, it's controlled, it's dispersed properly. All natural systems are regulating their own temperature, right? Just like our bodies. And that is the problem with technology, is it overheats. It has too much friction. It has entropy. It's, even according to the current models, the problem with the universe at large, I don't think so, but that is the model of the Big Bang and the materialist view. Okay, at the epicenter of the universe exists a humongous black hole that's imploding. On the other side of this black hole is a white hole that's expanding. So the male black hole is compression, right? That is the implosion. The white hole is the birth. The explosion, the female, right? These are represented by the numbers 3 and 6. The 3 representing the masculine, the triangulation. The 6 is the hexagon, the feminine. It's the vessel. It's the form. It's the beauty, right? Whereas the 3 is the spirit, the will, and the drive behind it. And when these 2 are joined, you get life. Okay, so this is showing there's only one preferred frame of reference for the entire universe. So even though there is relativity and there are different frames of reference and time is malleable, it can be sped up or slowed down, but not completely arrested, because ultimately the entire universe is a closed system with a one-way systemic flow. In other words, it circulates just like your blood. It's not, if your blood went backwards, you would die. So the system, even though it has counter motion within that overarching flow, is ultimately a one-way system. Okay. This is just showing the center point. Colloidal pinch is where spirit emanates out of the center of an atom, from the center of the universe. So the idea is this energy is emanating linearly in all directions from the center of everything, center of the atom, center of the universe. It is the singularity. Okay? It is the convergence point, right? The omnidimensional source of origination, where the unseen emanations of spirit are streaming forth. So you can call it spirit if you're uncomfortable with the term spirit. You can call it dark energy. But you have to get less uncomfortable with those terms, because I think ultimately, even for the standard current models, people like Bernardo Kastrup are showing that materialism just fails on every level, and consciousness is ultimately much more adequate for explaining scientific data. But it's not just consciousness. It is, like Schopenhauer realized, it's will, right? So what is will? That's spirit. Spirit, just in the sense, like even when people say they have school spirit or whatever, it means enthusiasm. It means you're awake. It means you're energized and alive. Spirit is the source of life, and it's the source of motion and vibration. It can even make you talkative. So here's some more of the art that Chuck and I did together. This is from base system, base 50, modular 49. Any true system has to be based on a prime number squared. Of course, I'm a purist that really believes they all reduce back to the base 10 modular 9 system, which is the perfect system, by just the fact also that it's the simplest. So you could call it Occam's razor, or you could call it the fact that God is always in good taste and does things in the most elegant, maybe eloquent too, but in the most graceful and elegant and simplest way. Because why not? Why do anything in any other way? So the most fundamental shape of existence is the torus. You can see here some more images of toruses, how it fits in with Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, how it explains cell divisions, the doubling of the scales and harmonics, musical scales, why chords, all chord inversions are based on a number 9 axis, as well as the Platonic solids and many others. You can see it a lot in the human body. We've already discussed a few things about that. I love this image showing how this shape intersects with certain key areas of the body. Now, if you look into some of the work of some of my colleagues with GOTA training, that's G-O-A-T-A, GOTA training systems, you can find them on Instagram and elsewhere. And they've done a lot of great work analyzing slow motion footage of the best athletes who don't sustain non-contact injuries, and how it has to do with the torsion in their motion, and how this mathematics really perfectly predicts the exact angles of motion, the way the joints want to move, how the body is not this linear cadaver thing, the way that exercise science has analyzed it to be, but it's a living system that's always based on spiraling. You can see it functioning in the fastest, most explosive, and best athletes. And so now we're really being able to model not only the micro level of how vortex-based mathematics predicts things like the DNA, which you can see here on the bottom, why the DNA is offset, what's going on in the major groove, but it also shows how the muscle chains in our bodies are working, what are the key points, the key locking areas, the key engines and power systems in the body, and how they work. And we're really showing that. That to me as an athlete and as just somebody who's interested in the spiritual and thereby the vehicle for the spiritual, the human temple, the image of God, because I'm so interested in that, this work with Goda and with the training and showing how it works with the body and the brain is, to me, some of the most interesting beyond just the energy stuff. So Marco's theory is that the relationships between numbers are real relationships which exist throughout nature. Numbers are real, ultimately. They represent not abstractions, but real points in space-time that are all unique, but all inextricable from one another. The numbers never come alone. They always exist together. The vortex-based mathematics is the opposite of conventional mathematics in the sense that we don't have fixed functions and transformative numbers. We have fixed numbers and the functions transform and change. The functions are the motion, are the waves that ripple through this fabric of the universe, which is ultimately what it is. That is, to some degree, a good term that they came up with, that there is this sort of fabric. What is that fabric? Ultimately, it's pure information in the end. It's a boundary condition. It is a metabolism. It's a disassociation. It creates individuality, but that individuality is never actually extracted from the unity of the whole. So they say here, the universal formula for indestructible numbers. The Abha cipher completely explains all the fundamental principles of the universe. Beginning and origin are all one and the same. So the alpha and omega are all one and the same, which is at the center. It's folded into the axis. Spirit exists within us. The kingdom of heaven is within us. And it really is the world of eternity and God. It's not just out there, but in here. It's literally within this world. The energy is coming from the inside. I think a lot of the standard models, like it's imparted from elsewhere, and there is that appearance because of the unity of all things, but in fact, it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain exactly how things are functioning, because that energy has to be coming also from within. Okay. So yeah, there's just so much you can say about that. We start talking about the W axis. So ultimately, when you look at this equation, those points that you see at the top, at the middle, and at the bottom are your X, Y, and Z axes. That's why we have this three-dimensional reality that we live in. Now, I'm a person that I don't assent to the theories of multi-dimensions beyond that. When we talk about the omni-dimension, we even talk about the W axis, right, which is the axis that the 9 is on, sometimes referred to as the time axis, right? But in reality, all of these things are slightly misleading. We live in a three-dimensional world, and I think even the worlds, subtler worlds than this, or other worlds of the divine, or heavenly worlds, or even hell worlds, are all share that if they have any sort of form, that form is three-dimensional in nature. I think these other postulations are fallacies. Now, what's supporting that, you could call it the fourth dimension being the magnetism dimension. You could call spirit existing in the fifth dimension. I don't really like those terms. I like the term the omnidimension, because you're really, once you're in this place, if you can't even say in this place, but once there is unity, true unity, then all of these things break down. Dimension, space, time, duration. And yet it's not that, but it is not bound to those things. And so when the difference, when you look at the green there, that doubling circuit is a bound circuit. It's a closed loop. It's a bound infinity. It's a mathematical term. The red pyramid, while connected at the apex at the number 9, while it is a vector, while it is directed, while it is ascending, while it is converging, while it has all of these properties, every property that you could imagine, it is also open-ended. It does not connect at the bottom. It's the number one mistake everyone still makes. Not everyone, but most people still make. They connect the 3 and 6 at the bottom. It's not connected at the bottom. It is ultimately open-ended. It's ultimately an unbound, eternal, and infinite reality that's incomprehensible to it. Because by nature, what is unbound is incomprehensible. That's why we're never fully gonna master spirit. Spirit is always the master. Spirit is always a step ahead of anything that exists. It's the true creator of the deterministic universe. The good news is that we are that spirit. But everything that is based on reflection is based on the past. It's always a mirror reflecting back in time and observing an already existent. And the spirit, the actual cutting edge of reality, the actual witness, is always ahead of that. The actual creator is always ahead of that. All right, and is setting the pace for everything. And so it's always going to fool everyone too, as long as it wants to, which is why we must be receptive to it. Only what is bound can be understood, can be conceptualized, because everything conceptualized has an image, and everything with an image is bound. Okay, what is unbound and what is beyond all that is very difficult to talk about, and thus our problem in bringing this forward. Okay, but we talk about it on the w-axis. So you have the x-axis and the y-axis, you have your vertical and horizontal, and you have that z-axis, which is coming out at you. And the energy does move along the z-axis, but there's also the w-axis, this absolute vertical axis. Every torus has one vertical axis. And I found it really significant. I've been mentioned this a few times recently, that when, take it for what you will, when Bob Lazar made his testimony about the UFO, that he said these craft, when they would move, they would turn up on their axis. So it seemed like they were pointing their vertical axis wherever they would want to direct their travel, which would be absolutely predicted by this. It makes total sense as to why they would orient that way and why it wouldn't matter to someone inside. The torus, we say, is still it's moving in relation to everything else, but it's still in relation to itself. It's its own source of gravitation. But the gravitation is not actually the force. The force is the emanation off the axis. And gravitation is its negative backdraft counter space. So as energy penetrates, it creates a wave that then collapses back towards the center in a vortex. Again, everything at its maximum acceleration will make a vortex. So the apex number 9 is spirit's fire, revealed by the crown chakra being vertically aligned above the zero's hole. Yeah, so you can talk about chakras, the 7 seals, all these things are on alignment, our spinal column, all the energy channels in our body are all based on this and can be mapped out with this math, and we continue to do it. Okay, so there you see the cipher of William Blake's painting there. This gets into a little bit more of the mathematics, talking about family number groups, which are just more of the details that probably wouldn't have time to get into here tonight, but all very significant things that show how these numbers triangulate. I use these methods to figure out what was going on years ago with the Platonic solids, with the flower of life. You know, I was able to work with Drumvalo Melchizedek. He shared with me his work on the flower of life. And a funny thing, just like most of the significant things that we discover in this, it just happened in about 5 minutes. And I was able to actually take the numbers and apply them to the map and thereby predict all the points for all these different geometries. So, you know, if that doesn't prove its significance, I don't know what else will, other than us building a flying saucer, which is the goal. So this is just more stuff about observations where you see the wave, the Fibonacci sequence, these 5 spirals. All of these emerge from these same mathematical sequences. People like Nassim Haramein have shown that when you curve that spiral along the circle of Markov's equation, it actually curves right towards where that intersection point of the doubling circuit is, which he was very shocked by. I don't know if there's still a video up of that, but that was an interesting early discovery of his. So these are more illustrations showing the skin of the surface of the torus, and now getting into how it starts to model waves based on waves of 9. How you can have these nodal points communicating with each other. And this gets back to what was said right at the beginning of it when Marco talked about these underpinning nested vortices. It means that the fact that the universe is a hologram that is a vortex, that is a torus, there are toruses all over the surface topology. I think Marco's always had the best analogy for that, or just is the best analogy, which is like dimples on a golf ball. Which control the lift and the flight properties using geometry, and much improve the golf ball, right? These vortexes allow you to steer it, okay, and to stabilize it. They're just like sunspots over the surface of the sun. They're vortexes that are all focused on the center. And because of this, as a flying machine, the idea is that these vortexes perfectly stabilize this apparatus to its vertical axis. So it can give you not only vertical lift as we perceive what's vertical from our relativity, but in any direction it can move along its own vertical axis using these nested vortices and how they sequence. So that's a big part of the work that I did, and what has always interested me most about this mathematics are the nested vortices and all the different patterns and sequence. My original videos that I made, 14 years ago, were largely about that, the very beginning of my work on that. And since then, that's been the main part of this that I've always focused on. I find it to be the most fascinating. This is again showing waves of 9. It gets into a little bit about the numbers, how these waves go over the surface. Now you're looking at the inside of the torus, this vortex well, this tree of life, which is where the energy is transformed. You can see the tiles expand and contract, right? They can get squeezed horizontally towards the center. They get squeezed horizontally until, I believe, at the very center, they're pretty much a vertical line. At the outer diameter, they get squeezed vertically or stretched horizontally, depending on how you want to look at it, and will towards the equator make a flat horizontal line, as close as one could get to it. And so by the expanding and contraction of these, you also have that warping and curving of time, space, or, quantum units of information. This mathematics is quantum because it's digital. It's perfectly digital. So that's where this gets into a little bit, talking about some of the ideas of its applications. Marco calls it the deca-qubit holographic hypercomputer. It's holographic because it's scalable up and down to infinity. This is the same pattern up and down to infinity, the same doubling pattern loop. And it expands out based on the inverse square law. So you can keep layering it, and the same patterns of the nested vortices all interlock. And everything that everybody's seen, and including myself for the most part, because all the actual visual models that have been done are of very simplistic toroidal models, the most simplistic that we could do, because it's sort of all you can manage to do by hand, or even doing simple animations on the computer. But I know from a lot of the work that I've done, and just the work that I've done on paper, how extraordinarily complex the interrelationships between all these vectors and numbers become as you scale this. And that's where I think when we can really apply this with AI, with computers, it's just going to go like that. It's going to be so easy because they just have the ability for that kind of scalability. That's very hard for human beings to do. Okay. This is showing some of the basic geometric shapes, the tilings that occur. Diamonds, hexagons. We mentioned the triangle is the 3, the hexagon, the 6. The diamond is the form of the number 9, which is seen all throughout. That's one of the things with the way that math is done. It's not really squares, it's diamonds, and everything has to be moving at an angle, which allows you to have a positive and a negative coordinate system overlaid. Ultimately, what composes a true mathematical system is that it has to have an embedded coordinate system, which many base systems do not. Some of this, and it was in a video that Marco and I did recently. I thought it was just something we were having a private conversation, but I guess it went out on YouTube, and that's fine. But we were discussing why different base systems, some of them break down and don't actually work, don't have coherent number systems, don't have a true coordinate system. And in my opinion, the true prime, which is the number 3, which stands outside of the pattern of all the other primes, is actually the perfect system. So I actually believe that all these other more complex systems reduce to the system, but that's not to say that they don't have applications with all the kind of things that we can do with prime numbers. And now with this system being able to take any prime number and unfold it into an incredibly sophisticated, multi-dimensional coordinate system of limitless information that can all be recompressed back into a single number. So this is talking a little bit about that, how higher dimensions are compressed, right? So it could be that all these higher base counting systems, which I'm probably the number 1 expert out there on those systems, can be compressed into smaller and smaller systems. But in the same way, they can be unfolded into incredible methods for storing data, for security, for all kinds of things. So diamonds are miniature mirrors aimed at the central axis inversion point. I know I'm coming up on my time here, so I'm just going to go through a little bit more. And then I can't see the chat now, but I want to take a look at the chat and see if there's some questions there we can get into as well. And I'm happy to come back in the future and do more on this after we get just through some of the basics. So the diamonds miniature mirrors aimed at the central axis inversion point. There's this point of inversion at the center. You know, it's like if you've ever read Dante, he goes down through the 9 levels of hell, and when he's crossing the very center axis where Satan is frozen in the lake at the center of hell, as he crosses the center, all of a sudden he finds that he's climbing up the devil's legs, where he was climbing down before. Once he crosses his waist, he's suddenly climbing up, and he's going back towards the surface, right? Because there is this inversion point at the center where everything turns upside down and where the magnetic poles also can shift. And there's a lot that we can do with that, harnessing that. Ultimately, we want to use this information, bring this into, excuse me one second. Okay, I'll read it to you from the man himself. Well, I'm just getting a little message from Marco here. He says, what needs to be done is to turn each tile into a gate, either on a molecular level or on a macro scale. Each white tile is up and each black tile is down. Okay, so this is part of matrix algebra. Russell Blake had done a paper explaining how this breaks down into matrix algebra. Also, some of this is the work of Scott Nelson, showing how it applies to plants. You can see here some animations I did with Tom Barnett, who's one of my students out of the UK, showing how these different layers work together. We've ultimately shown that numbers themselves are fractals. They can predict, they can unfold, they can make any shape, and they can show the pathway for all motion. So the key now, even though it's already been done to a certain degree, but the key, the next level step of this, and my true interest is it's the practical stuff. We have to use it, we have to harness it, and it's going to require a great effort of study and people getting up to speed. You can see we haven't even scratched the surface, and there's so much for people to learn. So our goals are the same as they've always been, which is to create a teaching curriculum, to have artists and writers, and to be able to direct a project for education. Because as I see it, and I've had opportunities, I mean, take the money, I would like to take the money a lot of the time. And we could go private, and who knows what will come of it. I'm sure it will all be conscripted. The only way for the people to get a hold of any of this is for us to find the ways to do it ourselves. What Steve is doing is excellent. As he was saying to me earlier, we're playing the long game. And that's what's so important about all of this. But we do have the insight. We know how to make the innovations. It's really just a matter of the teams and the resources. I have tried every way to think of how it can happen without a philanthropist, but it escapes us still. We're all still trying to make ends meet and just make it doable. But the first step is for people to get educated. I have to get beyond just talking these basics over and over like I've been doing for years and really carry people. As you can see, the work just goes further and further. You can show how these coordinate systems intersect, how you can predict any point, time, space, how you can model all dimensions, anything you would want to do. There's endless potential. And we're not even a little bit way through the book. But let me get off this full screen here for 1 second and see if maybe I can take a look at the chat. We had anybody in the chat? Not so far. All right. Well, if not, Steve, if you'd like me to go a little longer, I can keep going. Or we can wrap it up there. Oh, wait, I did see somebody writing a question there. Let's see. It says, what is the fastest spin rate of a rotor rod placed inside the center? I'd like to know currently what is the answer to that question. You know, I know Russ Grease, you can see a lot of his videos on YouTube. I don't know what his current channel is. You know, he's was doing some real serious work in quantum mechanical research for a while, but he did some incredibly fast measurements doing spins with the neodymium magnets and various pulse motors. You know, there was kind of pulse motor competition going on there for a while. And then we had all kinds of interesting other effects where the things would keep going when there was no energy going into it, or where you couldn't seem to get it to turn off. But there's very little what to my satisfaction would be, hard scientific data. We've got a lot of great proof of concept stuff. We do have some hard scientific data that was done in some studies in Portugal, which did prove differentiate whether the magnetic monopole is north or likewise south. All of those are good questions. We were able years ago, and that was with Jamie, to be able to create, I believe it only measured north. There's a lot of, everybody starts disputing things and what's what. That's why I feel like, what is legitimately a monopole or not. I thought certainly those experiments were really compelling. North and south don't exist. When you create, and I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, right? Yeah, when you create your own magnetic field, I assume you could place north and south wherever you want it to be. As far as being able to prove the monopole, like in a lab experiment, to my satisfaction, well, we need that repeatability. We were able to repeat that test a few times, but we haven't just had a consistent base of operations. As I was saying just a minute ago, to me, what's the most solid, like hard science lab data that we've had, which isn't necessarily the most impressive things that I've seen, which are two totally different things. There's things that I've seen and can attest to by my person, and then there's things which I have papers and data on. I think Jamie did some great work with the studies that he did showing using the coils with people who were suffering from burns and showing accelerated healing rates and various other things. So in that realm of healing, there's been some good research and data done. As far as the motors, there's been a lot of great amateur stuff. Jack's work out of Hawaii, Daniel, many people have done really interesting things there. But also those coils are sort of just approximate versions. So it was never for me to say how far you could really push them. They had some great effects, but they're still not fleshing out the math like we would like to see it. In my experience, like what's been done overseas, the closer we can get to following the actual principles of the math in terms of how we're designing this. I'm in the process of designing some coils with a partner out in India. We're trying to get closer to making the circuits correct and making the geometry correct. And what I found is the closer we get to the geometry being correct, the better the performance. And that involves ultimately what kind of we use and everything else. And then we have to get into closing the circuits, because ultimately this thing shouldn't have any inputs or outputs. And that's a big leap that we have to make in terms of how do you actually activate it? How do you coax this energy out? We're sort of trying to reverse engineer creation, because we know that the numbers never come alone. So if you can create the motion, you'll create the field. But really, things should be working the other way, and it should be the field that's kicking the whole thing off. And how we get to that point is sort of the next big endeavor with this. And that's how we got to push the numbers to the next level. But we certainly can't do that alone. So that's why we're out talking and bringing in a lot of other minds. My talents with this and my real area of contribution is, and it's the pattern recognition. It's the ability to read the language of the numbers from big to small and to know immediately where there's any kind of discrepancy or mistake. So where I've always worked in terms of technology is trying to lend my insights based on my understanding of the pure mathematics. I try to observe what the engineers are doing. I try to understand their insights and where they're coming from, and I try to help them refine that more and more towards the model as I see it. And as I've seen it, the closer we get to that, the better it works. So what are my comments on the Poe coil from Daniel Neri as it differs on the ABHA on the windings? I don't have any specific comment. I mean, Daniel's done a lot of great things. He's still doing great things. I don't have anything negative to say about what he's doing or has done. I can tell you how the coil differentiates. I mean, really, the ABHA coil in its simplest form should have a minimum of 6 separate circuits. Now, this is according to my work. Marco has a slightly different take on this, and the classic Rodin coil is slightly different. So all of these are things we're trying to explore and get to the bottom of. You know, I don't want to speak for Daniel because he might have a lot of other things to say. To my understanding, really, Daniel's initial innovation was partially just a practical thing. It made it easier to wind. It made it easier to kind of complete and to work with for him for what he was doing, which was just to connect all those circuits into one long circuit by continuing to skip. So it creates the appearance of a similar design. It creates the appearance of the vortex coil. And in many ways, even doing it that way, it does imitate that geometry in many respects, but it's not the same because it doesn't have these distinct circuits that are separated by these gap spaces in the same way. And so, again, nothing negative to Daniel. That's, you know, his work has done a lot to confirm a lot of our insights and to still show that, you know, this geometry has an effect in and of itself. But I think we can refine that to actually separating these circuit pathways, understanding how this field is interacting with them and getting them to interact. And, you know, in large part, it was a big confirmation because some of this stuff, it does present engineering challenges that it's going to, you know, we have to put our heads together to overcome. But I was very confirmed by the fact that, and I also thought, well, maybe Marco's right that the coil is bifiliar because the DNA is this double-stranded, double spiral helix, and I couldn't get, so the only way that I could work to, other than just the pure math says what it says, to support my own work is that in order for DNA to make a torus, it has to have a minimum of 3 double spiral helix strands bonded together in order for it to do that in the human body. Because and then it turns out the way that we are usually shown DNA, it doesn't exist in the body in that way. That's when it's been unraveled and, is being observed. It doesn't exist in the body that way. There are multiple of these bound together, and they make these toroidal shapes. And, the beginnings of even understanding this is only happening now at the cutting edge of medical science and biology. But it was a huge confirmation for me to find out that is what's actually going on in nature, that you do have to have these multiple separate strands being bound together. And my prediction or presumption about that would be what's binding them together is this field. So the question is, how do we go in reverse, not reverse engineer the creation, not try to coax just the field out by sort of artificially creating the vortex, but how do we go the other direction? How do we start from the field and tap into that directly? And I believe we can achieve that, but it takes some coordinated effort and consistent, a base of operations, consistent showing up to do it. Have you had any gravity shielding effects wrapping a coil with bismuth around a toroid filled with xenon? No, I would love to do those kind of things. I've never been able to do that kind of an experiment. But it sounds like you have some skills in that area, and that's what Tesla Tech's all about. It's trying to bring together people who can make these technical innovations. But what I do with all of this stuff, as I've learned about it, and as I continue to learn from various designers and innovators, with any of the materials, I'll analyze the properties. I try to figure out how it works with the math. I look at everything about it. That's what I would do if I was working in a lab with engineers. I would analyze all these materials in terms of the math. I would analyze everything, every step of the way in collaboration with an engineer, and everything that we do. I would just continually refer back to the math and do what Marco says that I do, which is quality control and refining. I saw there was another question there, but it disappeared. So you're talking about defying gravity. He's talking about manufacturing consciousness. I don't know who the he is. I don't know if you're talking about Marco or the other guy asking the question.
I think Warsaw's talking about Daniel, the guy who just asked the other question. But
well, I didn't get where he was talking about manufacturing consciousness. Well, I don't know that you would. The thing is, I think consciousness is the manufacturer. It's but somehow. I read this great quote earlier. Maybe this would be a good thing for me to leave you with for your contemplation, because it really spoke to me that this is I'm going to put it, this is very literary. It's a quote from Cormac McCarthy. But it really spoke to the heart of this issue, what I'm talking about. We're trying to do this reverse engineering of creation. We're trying to coax this field, but the part of the problem is it's sort of like that issue with forcing things that I've been talking about, and you can't really force it to do. So we're trying to get past this observer-observed dichotomy in order to have, as you were saying, not manufacture the consciousness, but have the consciousness manufacturing the representation, the physical effect. Now, as to whether or not these coils can help us to amplify that, that's partially what I think they are, amplifiers. Yes, I have built a graviductor set of coils. I do anti-gravity. Yeah, well, anti-gravity, even though it's kind of a double negative, is yeah, that, I mean, when it comes to technology, that's always been my primary interest. To me, freedom is synonymous with movement. Freedom is the freedom to move however you wish, you know. And my interest in all this technology was ultimately always in flying machines and in the UFO. I mean, I would not have been able to make the, you know, despite how crazy and flaky and woo-woo I may seem now, I have always been a very skeptical individual, and it takes a lot to convince me of things. I require a lot of, you know, you got to really slam my head against the wall for many years. And I've always been willing to believe things that had sufficient evidence, but always found evidence lacking. But once I became very convinced, not making claims about who or what it is, as far as aliens or fairies or secret military, I don't know what it is, but that there are advanced flying machines moving through our atmosphere in ways that I have witnessed, that are not drones, they're not satellites, they're not anything that we know of. They could be secret stuff that we have. They could be from elsewhere. They could be natural phenomenon or supernatural phenomenon. But I became completely convinced by the evidence that they were there, and then witnessed them on multiple occasions with my own eyes, which was very convincing to me. And so that's what turned my thinking about physics totally upside down. And when I encountered Vortex Based Mathematics, I thought, well, this is the only, I mean, to my thinking, sufficient, like really deep, logical, thorough explanation that's just simple and straightforward of how this is working, how it functions. It sort of brings all the elements together. That's not to say that we don't have a lot to learn. But yeah, ultimately, that is the freedom that the technology can offer. It is the sort of ultimate equity of technology, that everyone has the ultimate vehicle, the ultimate shield, the ultimate weapon, all of those things. And that is what allows us to have a sort of total freedom. And I was never interested in just trying to like enhance up our cities, you know. But I think it's great if somebody else comes along to do that. But I'll leave you with this quote, and maybe that will be sufficient for tonight. And I would love if Steve would like to have me back to come back and do more. But I thought this quote speaks to that. It says, acts have their being in the witness. Without him, who can speak of it? In the end, one could even say that the act is nothing and the witness all. It may be that the old man saw certain contradictions in his position. If men were the drones he imagined them to be, then had he not rather been appointed to take up his brief by the very being against whom it was directed? As had been the case with many a philosopher, that which at first seemed an insurmountable objection to his theories came gradually to be seen as the necessary component to them, and finally the centerpiece itself. He saw the world pass into nothing in the very multiplicity of its instancing. Only the witness stood firm, and the witness to that witness. For what is deeply true is also true in men's hearts, and it can therefore never be mistold through all and any tellings. This then was his thought. If the world was a tale, who but the witness could give it life? Where else could it have its being? This was the view of things that began to speak to him. And he began to see in God a terrible tragedy, that the existence of the deity lay imperiled for want of this simple thing, that for God there could be no witness, nothing against which he terminated, nothing by way of which his being could be announced to him, nothing to stand apart from and to say, I am this and that is the other. Where that is, I am not. He could create everything save that which would say to him, no. Now we may speak of madness. Now it is safe to do so. And I just thought that was such a brilliant quote, as cryptic as it may seem in this context, speaking to that exact conundrum of how do we witness that which has no witness, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve that paradox. That is, to me, the exciting game of vortex mathematics at this time. I think when it comes to the insights, it's really there. Marco did a tremendous service in all of his work, and I like to think I've contributed something to that and helped to flesh it out and take it the next step deeper. And my hope is also that others are going to come behind me and do that same thing. So I appreciate you having me on, Steve, and I hope that was somewhat helpful to keep this conversation rolling and take us to the next level.
Well, it's been a great evening and everything. I just want to remind people to sign up for the conference right now while we have 30% off until Wednesday, because Wednesday is the 31st. And so I'd like to see you all there. Marco will be at the conference. He plans to have a lot of material that he's going to present. So all I can say is show up at the conference, and I know that you're going to have a great time if you do come. And the hotel rates are reasonable. Go to our website, testatech.info, and check it out. You can call me up, 520-463-1994. And there's one more question that you might want to answer here from
Sure.
Daniel.
And I will say before I answer Daniel's question, definitely go to the conferences. Tesla Tech's always the most fun I've had at any conferences. I've been to a lot of conferences, some good, some not so good, but Tesla Tech is always like a homecoming and a great conference to go to. So Daniel says, I'm thinking that implementing a Rodin coil with my coil system might provide warp drive if the spin rate is high enough. I definitely would encourage you to do that, and if you want to get in touch with me, I can try and help consult you as to what your options are with different versions of the Rodin coil. I don't intend on spinning a rod, merely the scalar energy within a monopolar magnetic coil system. Hey, cool. The less external parts, the better. You have a few different options in terms of those coils, and we're building a team right now of people. We've got, other people that I didn't mention tonight, but we have some good collaborations going on. And, even though things have not moved as quickly as I would like them to, because I'm just an impatient person, in the end, I do see progress happening. I see good things happening, good potential things with Marco. I'm hoping that we can all come together soon. But if you have things to contribute to this, please reach out to me. You can email me at theabha@gmail.com. It's THEABHA kingdom@gmail.com. And, I will be happy to talk with you or put you in touch with people who can help, and just, keep going with it. I know that one of you out there is going to be the one to make the real breakthrough, and that's what we all want to see. And I hope I can be there and be a part of it.
Okay, well, and that's it for tonight. And I'll see you all next week. And thank you for being on the show, Randy.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Have a great night.
Great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.